Today we're talking about banking post-pandemic. Can you all hear me? I'll try to project the mask on. So we all know banking is a really boring subject. So
You're going to make it exciting.
no, I'm not going to make it exciting, but do have it on PowerPoint slides. So if anybody wants it, because some of it is a little tedious. So the success in banking is really going to be to anticipate and the ability to anticipate and meet the needs. I think you have something up there. There we go. And to pace and to implement that change with efficiency. So to achieve this agility and what the changes we need to do, I have listed out, and this isn't just from Fulton, this is with the Fed, this is with any of the banking sites that you would look at, is we need to expedite digital transformation in banking in years. We need to expedite it like we're 20 years in the future. Consumers are now less likely to use branches or cash, and they want to use a digital channel. But this is a trend. It's not going away. So a lot of people say when we go back to the way it was, it's not going back to the way it was. We have to offer habit-forming propositions. So we have to shape everything best for the customer experience. But we have to then balance the human and the digital interaction. So how do you balance that? I know we've got whoever banks with Fulton has had a lot of pushback. Your branches are never going to open. We have 2 branches that are open in the busiest part of the footprint, but post-pandemic, in the other areas are never going to open again. It's concierge banking. Hasn't affected our traffic, hasn't affected our transactions. People embrace getting in and out. It's all appointment based. We have to embrace the cloud. We actually, as the bank, just went into the cloud, and now we always complain we don't have enough storage. The cloud is where our storage is going to come from. This is interesting, and we see this a lot for the younger generation, the millennials and younger. They want to bank and be banking with someone who's purposeful, especially when it comes to environmental and social issues. You see it on TV every day, but now they have global matters. They want to know how that bank is giving back and if they're being responsible. That is a big push with the younger generation. This is where we lack in open banking platforms. So I did spell it out here because a lot of people are like, what's open banking platform? That's Venmo, that's PayPal, that's all the digital stuff. The UK has led the way, and it has doubled their concept of utilizing this last year. People want to go on their banking platform and be able to do everything, and if they bank with 5 banks, they want to see that 5 banks there. They want to use Zelle. Zelle is the PayPal of banking. It's supposed to be the safer option. As I say safe, go right into managing fraud risk. Fraud risk was up 400% this year. This includes check fraud, wire fraud, loan fraud, and especially elder and vulnerable elder exploitation. Banks need to institute hard and fast rules how we handle this. Each state is differently. I will tell you myself, in my own account, I sent a check to Verizon because someone in my house still believes checks. Sent the check for $275, and employees stole it at Verizon and cashed it for $6,000. So it happens to all of us. You just really need to be diligent, and your bank has to be on top of it and be ready to give you the idea of what you're going to do. This, for the people who are in the commercial world, if you know what LIBOR is and SOFR, so all of the large commercial loans were based on LIBOR from the beginning of time. That's the London Interbank Offered Rate. We are now asked globally to switch to SOFR, which is going to be a change for a lot of the customers who use financing. The main difference is how the rates are produced. And I put it on there, and I put a link to the Treasury Securities site because this is going to happen globally. Fulton's ahead of the curve. We have switched to SOFR as of this month.
LIBOR rate was stipulated a couple of years ago.
Yes. So, and globally, we have to change it. It's going to be federally. So if we move on, banks prepared for the worst case scenario for COVID. It never materialized, which was a good thing. Every bank set aside billions of dollars last year to prepare for default. We all had deferrals. We all got PPP, but the credit quality has remained strong. And banks are now seeing a boost to profits. If you read bank rate, you will see every day BOA, Citizens, TD, all the big banks, unbelievable profits this year. And the reason is we set all this money aside, expected defaults, and the good news is there wasn't hardly any. In my portfolio, knock on wood, not one default this year. That's an incredible statement going through what we just went through. But what does that do to our deposit and loan levels? So because of the stimulus tax, now we have lower spending. Personal savings have soared. As you know, a lot of people, that's part of our problem with the job industry. They really deposited all that money from the government and didn't spend a lot of it. So what has happened there is they're paying down their loan balances. There's not a need for a lot of loans, so it created the perfect storm. We have record low deposit rates. Online banks have been slashing their rates to ridiculously low levels. So if you went online and you went to like American Express, Ally, any of those non-brick and mortars, people would say to me, oh my God, they're offering 2%, 1.5 on a CD because they didn't have the overhead. Well, now they're feeling the pinch, and if you go on, they're horrible rates too. So you can't have it both ways right now, and that's what we're seeing with the rates. This is the $1 million question. I know somebody actually sent Derek one of these questions. Will the Fed hike the rates? So I know my partner in crime here, JP, is probably going to go over this, but this is how the banks feel right now. The odds of the Feds hiking the rates in 22 and 23 are way up from last week, according to the Fed Watch tool. The odds of one or more hikes by December of 22, not 21, were 85% this afternoon. That was yesterday. And that was up 71.1% last week. So the projections are, and these are just projections, I don't have a crystal ball or any insights. This is how it's going to roll the next 2 years. No rate hikes in 22, 1 or 2 in 23, 1 Fed rate in 22, or 3 hikes in 23, or 2 in 22 and 4 in 23. So they're the scenarios that are out there with the Fed evolving to see if they're going to go up or down. Obviously, our supply chain is broken. From what we heard, that supply chain is going to be broken through 23. So you got to remember that supply chain, job shortage, everything affects the banks and people's liquidity and people's loan and deposits.
What is the relationship between the Fed rate hikes and SOFR? How does it?
The Fed, well, now that we're switching to SOFR, it's a little bit different. So it's a global look. So it does affect. Everything will affect SOFR. It will affect the interest rates. It's a whole rate game that we're playing.
So that's global. Is it? It's not one for one. It could be different.
Right. It's going to be a global. It's going to be a whole different way of looking at things moving forward. I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent at this point. I'll speak to that.
Well, I won't. But so what Mary is saying is that the Fed is only looking at the U.S. economy, and SOFR is global. The U.S. economy has a tendency to lead the global economy. So we may see changes in rates here in the U.S. and the global rates could lag. At least historically, that's how it's.
So we're going to see how it decides, the deciding factor, but that supply chain, I think. to everything, because now we're looking at a global platform, not just us. So the bad news is the hopes for CD increases, and that's, the million-dollar questions, have basically diminished. We're just not going to see things. There's going to be an occasional special. I have not seen one above 1%. Someone sent me one from one of the credit unions the other day. It was 0.75 for 3 years.
That's us.
Is that you? For 3 years, and I'm like, I just wouldn't tie in. Sorry, Ryan. For 3 years.
I was like, bye.
Right.
People.
Right. My personal advice would be at this point is that you look into money markets that have minimal balances. Keep your funds liquid. So if a good CD value comes, that you can acquire it quickly. Another thing, to remember is why put your money in banks? Because of FDIC insurance, obviously. Your money is still safe in banks. Knock on wood, in my 20 years, I've only seen in this area one FDIC check handed to me once for $250,000 for a bank that went under. I think that's really good in 20 years. There's one thing I do for every person. You should go on the ED calculator. I put that link here. That's a federal government calculator. That's basically how you title your money. So if Candace wants to put 250 in her name, 250 in her daughter's name, 250 in her husband's name, 250 in the dog's name, hypothetically, you can see if it's safe or not.
He is my favorite child.
That's right. They always are. So this calculator is a great tool for any person that wants to see how they should title it and how safe they are. God forbid the bank will go under. It's a great tool I give to all the clients. So the summary is banking, like all other business, is just trying to survive the pandemic. We are going to have to change. We're going to have to let the consumers utilize their services and quickly adapt. We have to go on a rapid pace. The concern is that rapid pace is the next 5 to 10 years, keeping up with the digital changes, but also all the fraud that's coming along right now. That could be a whole nother day's topic of the fraud we're seeing. The near future, which I'm saying could be the 5 to 10 year, no coin, no cash, no paper checks. Big banks are going to start reducing their big storefronts. Like my office here, like Costco, is huge. It just doesn't look that from front to back. They're going to go to the T-Mobile, the Verizon store concept. You walk in, we all have iPads. How can we help you? Or appointment-based. They're all going to be hybrid offices in the future. Fortunately, your money is still safe in banks, not gaining much on the earnings, but on the flip side, for Pandas, we're still going to see lower rates. It may not be extreme low, but right now, residential, commercial loans, and personal loans are at an all-time low still. I know I have one question I had to answer for someone that sent it to Derek, and he sent it in. He asked about, or she asked about, building construction loans, and where do we see that future? We still do construction, the perm loans. Our IRA, our real estate people, they have not seen a slowdown, especially in the Philadelphia market. I think they were up like already for the year 300%. So what we see happening is the people that have the money are investing, buying, and still building. Now, with supply chain disruption, the problem is they're all putting in for, when we look at their usages for the money, and we do inspections, they're all putting in a paragraph on how they can hike up your prices. The average residential has a 15% increase built right into that contract. And I had somebody had to go back to a client and tell them that their lumber for this specific job was going to cost $5,000 more. And the client said, okay, I need the building built. So we are still lending construction to perm, but they are utilizing a special paragraph for the increase because of the supply chain. So I try to make it quick, easy, on paper. Do you have any questions?
So banking is, I'm a recent retiree, 32 years at Wells Fargo.
There you go.
But what about, we started moving, I retired, we were just going into the pandemic and trying to figure out how to get my whole so forth. Anyway, what about the seniors that they still want that, be able to call, and I'm thinking about my mom, not online, thinking about my old lady that's not online yet, and she just became executor and needed to call the bank to get an appointment with the bank's at. Didn't know who to call, called me to try to get her in the door. Call an 800 number, and it's, taking you to a central area versus the branch. I mean, are we thinking through that we still have a generation of folks that need to think of it?
So in my old office here, we have a good port in Chamonix Falls, a bank there. So you're right. If they can't, the easiest way is to go online, make an appointment. So if they can't do that, what we have done is that you can still call your local branch, at least for regional and smaller banks. I don't know if a Wells or a TD or Citizens would offer that. So there's still direct lines to a core group that works there that they can call, still talk to that person. Unfortunately, with fraud though and elder abuse at its highest, when you call, I always say just give me a retina scan. It would be easier. What is your security word? What is your hint? What is this? What, like you have to go through 4 indicators now. And unfortunately, they are still going to have to because they are getting hurt the most with the scams that are going on right now. So the only workaround is that they call a core group. I would like to see them implement in all banking almost like a senior banking package where you would have, person like us that have been in banking 20 more years just deal with that group of people. I have seen a big uptick of bankers that have retired and now are doing that as a business, just helping seniors. But they are at the highest risk of fraud, which really scares me.
It's scary.
So it's interesting you guys are going to more the smaller retail type of, as a firm, it's kind of what we've been doing since 1922. We have 17,000 locations. So we had always had, the individual people coming in and having that personal. I think that's actually something that most seniors, in our experience, they didn't see much of a difference. They couldn't come in, but a lot of them, I was surprised by how many of them would say, hey, I'm going to meet virtually. And at first they were like, eh. But as soon as we said Zoom, they're like, oh yeah, we Zoom with the grandchildren all the time. So there was a surprising uptake of that technology that we use now and we continue to use with older clients. So I think it's going to continue to be that way, that we're not going to be doing business in such a way that we have these large, whether it's in banking or lawyers and so forth. I know of a few law firms that are like, we don't need all this smaller. We need like 2 conference rooms and everybody else can work remotely. So I think we're going to continue to see this shrinking of the footprint when it comes to commercial real estate or retail locations. The impact on commercial real estate is something that I'm very concerned about because we just don't have the businesses to take up the slack as these locations get small.
And we were going through that where they still are, and everyone's still. But they're looking at got everybody home for the pandemic. It worked. So now, how do we keep some folks home, and we don't need locations. I didn't work in branches of private wealth, but we don't need the office space,
Yeah.
that we have.
That's where my concern lies with all of this work from home. Does some of it get like downtown Philly? If I was in commercial real estate in downtown Philadelphia, I'd be panicking. Unless it's going to get converted into mixed use or residential.
A lot of shared space. So I was included, put the whole thing down, combined with another group and space.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. So I was asked to talk more about what's going on in the markets and the economy and everything else not interest rate and Fed related. So what I'm actually going to talk about is 4 E's: employment, energy, economy, and eggs. So when it comes to employment, we're continuing to see the labor markets improve with the gradual reopening of the economy. This is especially true as the economy moves from goods consumption into services. The service labor market is a lot larger than the goods manufacturing sector. So as the service market starts to continue to reopen, that's going to allow more, take up more of the slack that we're seeing in. We are continuing to see hesitation to re-enter the labor market, and it's usually for one of three things. The enhanced unemployment benefits, which has now essentially stopped from the federal government, but as Mary indicated, people put a lot of those extra checks in their banks, and so they still have that money to spend. So it wasn't immediate. As soon as the check stopped, everyone's rushing back to find work. There is a little bit of slack there as well. The second thing that we're hearing is lack of childcare options. That continues to be a situation and a problem for working parents. And third, health fears. People still have health fears about, breakthrough cases and getting sick. We think all three of these will slowly start to dissipate, and we'll continue to see labor over time. Energy. Magic number here is 80, as in dollars per barrel. At $80 a barrel for oil, a lot of producers outside of OPEC can be very profitable. So they're probably going to be increasing their production. OPEC, of course, regulates itself production-wise, but Russia doesn't, and the U.S. doesn't. So at $80 a barrel, our production will probably continue to go up, and that should help keep prices relatively for gas and oil production. Oil is used as the basis for production of plastics, but it's also used to refine into gas and diesel, which is used to transport all of those plastics to us as consumers. So it's something that is fairly ubiquitous and has a major impact on a lot of different areas in our lives. At $80 a barrel, the market's kind of freaked out when it hit 80. But we need to remember that as consumers, we've been at $80 a barrel before. As a matter of fact, between 2011 and the mid-2014s, the average price for a barrel of oil, $96 a barrel. And yet, during that time, the economy grew at 2% despite slow labor market recovery and consumers paying down debt and service. In contrast, now we have a substantial household savings, as Mary was indicating, Labor rates are rising at a pace faster than we've seen in decades. So the other thing to keep in mind is something called an oil reliance in rate and intensity, oil intensity. In 1950, for every dollar produced in the US economy, it required about 15 BTUs of energy consumption. Now, that same dollar to produce $1 of GDP is down to 5. We've become a lot less energy reliant for our economy and a lot less intensive. We continue to anticipate that that number will continue to up as we handle environmental conversion to less oil intensive energy use. Fourth, economy. The economy in the first quarter, GDP grew at 6.4%. We do not anticipate that that's going to continue throughout the rest of the year. We do see it continuing to be positive, just not that high. Now, if we look historically at recoveries, how long it took and what the total increase, on average, it's about 24%. Each recovery had about 24% over time, different variables of things. We've only started at 6.4%. We have, on average, we have quite a runway left that we can go have our GDP growing. So we do anticipate that it's going to be going up just at a slower rate. Do not confuse that with a recession or shrinking of the U.S. economy. It's going to continue to grow, just not quite as fevered and hectic as we saw in the quarter. Services are going to be the sector that really leads. We anticipate this next leg of the recovery. Again, as services continue to open back up, and I discussed this employment, we anticipate that services are going to be the sector that really leads now through next Q3 and Q4. We do see consumption remaining strong globally. Consumers tucked away $5 trillion, and that's still sitting on the sideline, waiting to be either invested or spent. So there's plenty of fuel in the global economy. Fourth E, eggs. Price of eggs in 1950, 5 cents an egg. Price of eggs in 2021, about 21 cents per egg. Yes, inflation. Everybody's been talking about inflation. It is a concern, especially for people who are in retirement and on a fixed income. We just saw, I think it was last week, Social Security Administration had one of the largest percent increase in cost of living adjustments because of inflation. Now, one thing to keep in mind, inflation in the near term can be a problem and is something to be. But what we're seeing right now, a lot of it is, some of it's the supply chain issues that they're seeing, but there's a much larger factor that's called base effects. The base effect is when you look at inflation rates, typically price of goods compared to 1 year ago. You remember 1 year ago, way back a year ago, everything was still effectively shut down. And so nobody was buying anything. And prices fall high. Compared to now, where the economy is in a very different loop. We have a lot more consumption going. Year over year, yeah, prices have shot up. But as that base effect goes away, when we're looking in November and December and January of next year, we're comparing to January this year, that base effect is going to start to. Supply chain issues are still a problem. We don't anticipate like early 2022, get everything figured out. A lot of it has to do with labor as well. You know, I read a Barron's report last week that said we have something like 72 containers at anchor off of the port of LA. Usually we just can't get the material off the ships. Now, we can talk about, you know, the labor laws and unions and LA. That's part of what's going on, but we think as labor gets better, we'll start to see supply chain mitigate. Yeah, all the major ports. I read somebody said that that to say leadership in Washington, what Reagan did to nationalize them. Longshoremen. Yeah, that would be a political. That would be a massive political issue. So, what does that mean for the markets? We are still very bullish on the market, anticipating to continue to see gains, albeit slower than we saw coming out of the pandemic. The market did exceptionally well, resilience, much the way the banks did. Energy, employment, and inflation, these are all concerns, and anticipate that these short-term concerns, they will, fluctuation in any of this are going to cause the markets to pick up. We are looking at any substantial pullback as an opportunity. Consumers are wanting to buy stuff. We just don't have this. So again, there's a lot of powder in the keg ready for. We just need to get some of these other. So any pullbacks we see in the market anticipate to be short term. Any questions?
The model portfolio is still 60.
Model is the model portfolio still a 60-40 equities to fixed income? I would argue no. If your timeline is, then you have the ability to really risk profile. If your time frame is a lot shorter, I have people say, here's all of our money market money, not getting anything at markets, I want to invest it. The question is, what's the purpose of this? It's something that they want, 6 months from now because they're working with Canada and they're going to buy a house. Well, I'm not putting it into a 60-40. But if it's a 30-year-old and we're talking about their 401k, then I'd be looking like 80-20. So it really is a matter of how much risk you're somewhere in that spectrum. So one portfolio allocation is sorry, I didn't have power. By the way, if anyone's interested, almost everything that I said, we have quarterly reports go out. If you're interested in seeing the quarterly report, just let me know afterwards and I'll send it to you.
Also, you